Good evening, everybody, and lovers of literature, people who enjoy books, friends of the Mahesh family, great musicians on the stage, my dear friends. Writing a book is no easy feat because you take a piece of paper, the first few lines come out. By the time you finish the paper, you're convinced it is not so good. And then you leave it, and the next day you read it, you're convinced it's very bad, and you junk it. So many scripts lie scrolled up inside our waste paper baskets that the idea that you pick, you have to actually find a good enough idea to stay invested in it for a very long period of time when you're writing a novel. And as it has been said by Mala and Mala's daughter, that it's 11 years of effort. So for 11 years, you shouldn't get tired of these characters and their settings and their predicament. And this is indeed, a testament to the fact that there has to be some depth inside this. So when one is looking at Padma's life and trying to figure it out, there are so many layers inside Padma's life which is so unique. And it was in 1900, 100 years before. And around that period, when a woman didn't have a child, it was, literally curtains, even if your husband loved you. And if your husband goes and takes another wife and there's a child born, she's so excited, and I started getting a feeling that I'm going to see Yashoda and Devaki kind of a phenomenon here, because you're raising somebody else's child, and then when the child slips and falls, it's like, oh my God, it's like, what has happened? And then the trials and tribulations and the love of the husband. But what struck me was the kind of quality of Victorian literature inside that, wherein which she moving to another house and then becoming an agriculturist and raising money and wealth, and thereby retaining her status, that seemed a very positive, strong force, in the agrarian society in that time. Women were just about getting educated, and to be able to think of a character, which is a real character in this particular case, that she could sufficiently give wealth. But there is so much of complexity in the character. It's not just a pure, nice person. Diamonds come in, family politics come in, and you make mistakes and then you recover. And this is one such story. And when you're counterpointing it with 100 years later, and then things are so different, right? So you have, but the tribulations are the same. So when I was reading this story, I was, fascinated by another great book which I had, come to know and read and seen, and it's called The French Lieutenant's Woman. It's by John Fowles, and Fowles writes about it in a way wherein which he was fascinated by one visual of a Victorian woman standing on a quayside. And she used to work in some family, and she was sort of disgraced, and she stood in the quayside looking at the sea. So based on this visual, he kind of conceived the entire story and wrote it. And there also you have this triangular structure of a man, another woman, and this trials and tribulation, money coming in, going, and all that. But what was interesting is something for you. The intercut that you see is there in the film, but in the book it's different. It's 3 possible endings. But when it became a film with Harold Pinter, they intercut between the lives of the actors and the characters written, and it keeps cutting back and forth. So maybe there is a film in your book. So, so maybe the next thing to do is to make a film where you intercut. Probably you'll have to look at a slightly different structure and get Harold Pinter involved or some, person. But yeah, so there is definitely a story inside this. and it's worth making into something. So I do hope that your dreams are fulfilled in such a manner. And uh, and Naina's character is far more complex than Padma's. It becomes so much more intriguing. But having said that, it is truly I mean, courageous to write your first novel like this. First of all, cutting back and forth in time. Making sense of one story is difficult. Making sense of two stories is even more difficult. And then trying to, uh, talk about subjects like, um, there is this famous Matru Suktam by Shankaracharya, where he who, after losing his mother, Astam Tavadiyam Prasudi Samaye Durvarashu Labhyatha Nairuchyam Tanushoshanam Malamai Sayyasa Sambalsari Ekasyapi na Garbhabhara Bharana Kleshasya Garbhabhara Bharana Kleshasya. This is something, is such a important aspects, but it is swept aside. It's not discussed, and it requires the courage of a woman to write about the real agony that and the pressure that this can bring about. And in psychological terms, as your daughter is a practicing psychologist, uh, IVF treatment actually induces a lot of trauma, of emotional trauma for things. It inflames the emotions of people. So all these things that you have written has solid psychological backing, as well as your own personal research. So I do hope that you write more novels and continue writing, and please write about men also. Please write about please write about music. We are all fascinated by music, and we know all of you are fascinated by music. And do hope that you make this into a film, and it should be seen by a larger number of people. Thank you.